Hello and welcome then to episode 4 of RWR Plays TEW 2020. We are of course playing as WCW in 2001 and rebooking the relaunch of WCW that never actually happened in the end. Just a bit of a recap. I thought we'd start with what happened at WCW Big Bang. Sting defeated in the main event of the show by Booker T. Booker T retaining his WCW World Heavyweight title. And then additionally, after the match, Booker T being attacked by the Magnificent Seven and Sting returning to the ring with a baseball bat and clearing them from the ring. Also, we introduced Ric Flair. We introduced Kurt Hennig, I should say, who then faced Ric Flair on the show in an impromptu match. We introduced Tommy Dreamer as the latest signing for WCW. We introduced Jerry Lawler as the new color commentator in the company. We had Mike Awesome and DDP advance to the final of the US title tournament, and they will face each other in the main event of Nitro today. And on top of that, Totally Buff defeated Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo to win the WCW World Tag Team titles. So a fair amount of happenings at the Big Bang, but we're going to start to put in place our longer term plans in the next couple of weeks on Nitro, beginning with today's episode. That's what I wanted to go through before we go into Monday Nitro, so here we go then. And we start with a couple of pre-show matches. We've got 1,670 people in the arena. The Peaks Ice Arena in Utah, apparently, is where we are based today. And in the first pre-show bout, Alex Wright and Norman Smiley have defeated James Storm and Chris Harris in 5:36 when Alex Wright pinned Chris Harris. This got a segment rating of 38. Norman Smiley and Alex Wright had good in-ring performance. Harris and James Storm not so much, but that's fine. It's going to take a little bit of time for us to get them. We're not using them as anything but jobbers at the moment. Eventually we probably will use them as something more than that, but right now we're not worried about their popularity too much. Alex Wright and Norman Smiley, I wanted to check here, and they have showed excellent chemistry teaming together, so that's a really good sign. These are two guys that don't have huge individual plans for, but I thought they might work quite well as a tag team. I think if we remove their sort of dancey comedy gimmicks that they've got and give them something a little bit more serious, they're both pretty good wrestlers and both European. So I think they could potentially have a pretty, they've got a dynamic that I can work with, and I think I'm quite interested in. So hoping to use them as a tag team going forward. In the other pre-show match, we've got Stevie Ray versus Reno. Decent reaction from the crowd, but terrible reaction. Stevie Ray defeats Reno in 6:57 by pinfall. Segment rating of 36. Stevie Ray 38, Reno 22. The only reason I put this match in was really to see if Stevie Ray was at all okay, and the fact that he's not at Reno level poor means that I'm relatively comfortable with him. Stevie Ray I don't imagine we'll use too much of, but I just wanted to really assess whether or not he was going to be any good for me, and he seems alright. He seems okay. So now we go into the episode of Monday Nitro that follows the Big Bang, and it begins with a video package highlighting and recapping all the happenings from the Big Bang, including Sting losing to Booker T, Mike Awesome defeating his partner Lance Storm in the US title tournament semi-final, the debut of Tommy Dreamer and of Kurt Hennig in Kurt Hennig's impromptu match with Ric Flair, and of course Scott Steiner attacking Booker T along with the Magnificent Seven until Sting came to the save of Booker T. Segment rating of 58 here. Pretty decent start to the show, just to kind of get everyone recapped on those people that didn't watch on pay-per-view the night before. The show itself starts with just a basic singles match. It's Vampiro versus Lash LaRue, and Vampiro wins in 7:43 by pinfall. Vampiro had a performance of 51, Lash LaRue a 26, segment rating of 46. Pretty happy with that. Vampiro defeats Lash LaRue. So then out come Scott Steiner, Ric Flair, Rick Steiner, Road Warrior Animal, Lex Luger, Buff Bagwell and Jeff Jarrett. The Magnificent Seven are here, and they are not particularly happy. Scott Steiner says that last night Sting made an enemy of the Magnificent Seven and he will pay. Ric Flair says that now Sting has had his chance for the WCW World title, it's time for Big Papa Pump to get his shot at the belt that he should never have lost in the first place. Flair says that Bischoff needs to come out right now and confirm that he's making the match, or there will be consequences for everybody. So the segment rating here, 58. Performance of Ric Flair was fantastic. Scott Steiner came across well. Pretty decent in general, this talking segment. So Eric Bischoff comes out to address the demands that they've made, and Bischoff says that nobody's scared of the Magnificent Seven anymore. He says that the roster are going about their business. They're not living in fear anymore of the interference or the interruptions of Flair and his gang. And he says that everybody else is just getting on with their careers, pursuing titles and trying to get victories that will improve their standing in WCW. He says that one day Scott Steiner might deserve a WCW World title shot, but to him and to the Championship Committee, he's not there at this point in time. He says that the problem that they've got is they haven't got any power anymore. He says that Ric Flair is no longer in control, Scott Steiner is no longer the world champion, and so their power base that they fed off of when they were in control of the company is completely gone. But he says that there is something that he wants from them, and he offers them a deal. He says that he's got an idea for a double or nothing deal, because Eric Bischoff says that he wants rid of the Magnificent Seven just as much as they want Scott Steiner to have a world title shot. And so he proposes a match, 4 versus 4 at the Great American Bash, the Magnificent Seven to enter a team, and a team to be led by Sting would go up against them in an old WCW favourite, War Games. He says if the Magnificent Seven win, then Scott Steiner gets his title shot. If Sting's team win, the Magnificent Seven have to disband, and that will be the end of the Magnificent Seven. Scott Steiner and Ric Flair briefly look at each other seriously, and then they break into smiles. And Flair says that they have a deal, because there's no way Sting can assemble a team who would be willing to take the risk of opposing them, who would be willing to put their career on the line in such a violent match just to get rid of them. And he says that Sting and Bischoff are going to rue the day they made this offer, because it is the day that the Magnificent Seven began their rise once more in WCW. So we have our main event of the Great American Bash announced here. It's going to be a War Games match, the Magnificent Seven against a team to be put together by Sting with the stipulations that we just spoke about. And you've got a whole sea of green here, so that's really cool. Segment rating of 57, pretty happy with that in general. Next up, Bill Goldberg comes out for a squash victory over Bobby Eaton. Segment rating of 47. Goldberg a rating of 80. Eaton only 38. Bobby Eaton just really here some fodder for Goldberg. We've brought Bobby Eaton back into the company because he's a good influence backstage, and also he's a good wrestler. So we brought him in. I don't imagine we'll use him massively, but it's nice to have Bobby Eaton in WCW again anyway. Next, Tony Schiavone backstage says that he has arranged with Lance Storm for an interview. Lance Storm arrives on the scene, and the first question that Tony Schiavone asks him about is his reaction to losing to his Team Canada teammate Mike Awesome at the Big Bang and missing out on the final of the United States title tournament. Lance Storm looks at Schiavone, shakes his head, and then walks off without responding to the question. It's got a segment rating of 36. I wasn't expecting massive things from this. It's just a little bit of filler between matches here. Next up, a 6-man tag match. The Filthy Animals, Conan, Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman versus The Wall, Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo. A decent match. Rey Mysterio pinned Kid Romeo after 8:44 for his team to win. Segment rating of 51. Kidman 60. Rey Mysterio Jr. again performing well. And their opponents not so well. The Wall, a performance of 27, and I don't see a huge amount of The Wall being used in the future, to be perfectly honest. But anyway, we wanted to get him onto a show and see what he was about. Not much, given what we've just seen. After this match is another backstage segment, this time with Tony Schiavone speaking to Kurt Hennig, and Tony Schiavone welcoming Hennig back to WCW. Kurt Hennig says that it's absolutely brilliant to be back in WCW. He's happy he's here, and he's going after gold. He's going to have one last run in his career, and he believes that he can do that in the next couple of years in WCW. He's then interrupted by Ric Flair, who smarmily asks Hennig how he did in his first match back last night at the Big Bang. Hennig tells Flair that he knows he only won because Flair's goon helped him, and he'd whoop his ass any day of the week. The pair then start shoving one another, but officials intervene before this can turn particularly physical. Segment rating of 55. Tony Schiavone underperformed, but Ric Flair looked good. Then we have a match with Sting versus Buff Bagwell. Sting defeated Buff Bagwell in 12 minutes and 13 seconds. Segment rating of 68. Sting had an in-ring performance of 77 and Buff Bagwell 58. Pretty decent this. Yeah, pretty pleased with this. Sting getting a morale-boosting victory after his loss to Booker T last night at the Big Bang. After the match, the Magnificent Seven run to the ring and attack Sting until Booker T arrives on the scene, clearing the ring of the Magnificent Seven and returning the favour of Sting from the night before. Segment rating of 65 here. Afterwards, Booker T grabs a microphone and tells Sting that Sting better count him in for the War Games match at the Great American Bash. Sting shakes his hand to seal the deal. So here, Booker T becomes the first man to join Sting in the War Games match against the Magnificent Seven at the Great American Bash. Next up, a bit of a time filler match here. Bam Bam Bigelow defeated Ice Train in 6:56 by pinfall. Ice Train was already on the roster as somebody called the Limo Driver, and I don't really know what that gimmick was about or anything. And to be honest, I've not got any huge plans for using Ice Train, but I felt like Bam Bam Bigelow is someone we might use in the future, so gave him a little bit of a victory here to boost his popularity maybe. Segment rating of 45. Bigelow was pretty good, 50. Ice Train not so good, 23. Next up, Shane Douglas and Chronic come to the ring, and Shane Douglas talks about the previous night. He brags that at the Big Bang he defeated Bill Goldberg in 30 seconds, completing the most dominant victory over Goldberg in history. In doing so, he says he proved to everybody exactly what he said last week, that he is the franchise of WCW. At that point, Bill Goldberg rushes the ring, but Shane Douglas and Chronic scarper through the crowd to make their escape, leaving Goldberg angry in the middle of the ring as the fans cheer him on. Segment rating of 55. Shane Douglas and Bill Goldberg's story continues here. Next match, Jeff Jarrett versus Hugh Morris. Jeff Jarrett defeats Hugh Morris in 11:06 by pinfall after a distraction from Vampiro. So, towards the end of the match here, Vampiro walks to the ring and is watching on. Eventually, he grabs the attention of Morris, who argues with him, allowing Jarrett to creep up from behind and pin him with a distraction roll-up. Vampiro walks away looking satisfied with himself as Morris argues with the referee about Vampiro's involvement. The announcers, meanwhile, speculate as to why Vampiro came to the ring in the first place and why he distracted Hugh Morris to help Jeff Jarrett get the victory. Jeff Jarrett, good in-ring performance here, 63. Morris, not bad either. Segment rating only 55, but that's a pretty decent match. Then, before the main event, Mike Tenay and Jerry Lawler talk about next week's episode of Monday Nitro, and Tenay reveals that he's just received word that the main event of Nitro next week, a match has just been made. It'll be Booker T and Sting versus the Steiner Brothers in a tag team match. Also, Goldberg will be in action again, so will Kurt Hennig, and Tommy Dreamer will be making his WCW in-ring debut, all on next week's show. Segment rating of 55, pretty decent. Now we lead to our main event for the United States Heavyweight title. It's Mike Awesome versus Diamond Dallas Page, and Mike Awesome defeats Diamond Dallas Page in 17:05 by pinfall following interference from Lance Storm. Mike Awesome wins the WCW United States Heavyweight title and also wins the US title tournament in the same breath. Segment rating of 64, Mike Awesome a 57, DDP a 68. Mike Awesome, though, seemed off his game, so he's capable of more, apparently. What happened here is that Lance Storm, in the middle of the match, walked to the ring and kept his distance, seemingly just watching on. But eventually, with the referee down and both men also down, he gets into the ring. He briefly looks as if he's going to superkick Mike Awesome and instead turns and superkicks Diamond Dallas Page, allowing Mike Awesome to hit an Awesome Bomb, the referee recover, and Awesome get the victory. So Mike Awesome wins the US title and the tournament at the same time with help of Lance Storm, his Team Canada teammate, who apparently is going to allow what happened at the Big Bang to slide in terms of their match with one another, and they are still together as a pair. So that is Monday Nitro. Decent segment rating for the main event. Increased our popularity everywhere, which is really good. Overall rating of 65 for the show. We've got some decent kind of stuff lined up for next week's Nitro. We've already announced. I think we've progressed a number of stories. We've opened up a couple of others, and Mike Awesome is now our US champion, which is one of the vacancies we had at the beginning of this show in terms of, that kind of, I guess, kind of concludes what we were trying to do with Booker T, and whether or not we were going to have him hold both belts. And at one time I did consider having Booker T hold both belts for a bit and see whether or not we can make something out of him having to defend both of them. But I decided it was a less complex way to go, to just have a tournament and get sort of a main event as well out of this on Nitro, where Mike Awesome defeats DDP. A big victory for Mike Awesome. Someone, as I said, we've identified quite early on, it's important within our mid card, and somebody that we probably will be looking to elevate, whilst DDP is someone who's pretty Teflon in WCW, as someone who can take a loss here and there. So yeah, pretty happy with that main event. So that is the end of this week's episode, and I think we're finding our feet a little bit more with some of this stuff. As I say, it's going to take a little bit of time until we get into full flow, because we've inherited a roster and a kind of set of stories and a scenarios that were beyond our control, that that were just what was going on at the end of WCW in real life. But we're starting to turn WCW into the thing that we want it to be. I'd anticipate that for the next episode there might be one or two additional signings, maybe, or at the very least some allusions to new signings. And I think we are well on the way now to the Great American Bash. Incidentally, that build will take a further 4 weeks of Nitros, because the Great American Bash is due to take place in the second week of June. So we've still got, as I say, 4 weeks of TV to fill before then, but plenty of kind of developments in order to get to that show before we get there anyway. So thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up, a like below, and also give us a subscription. Follow us along so that you can continue to watch the series. But until the next time, thank you for joining me.